Hello, boys and girls. This is Chadman from the ChadTopia, and we have a rather special thing for you today. I have a discussion with a Battlefield caster from America, otherwise known as Daskro. Good evening, Daskro.
Good evening. Glad to be here.
Yeah, now the reason I dragged poor old Daskro in here, kicking and screaming, is obviously because of his interest in Battlefield and esports in general. Wanted to have a discussion with him about the Battle Recorder. Now, for those of you who are not aware of what that is, this was a recording system that enabled you to essentially record demos and then go back and do films and all that kind of stuff. Now, for those of you who have not seen any of the Gamescom coverage, you will know that essentially Battle Recorder is not being included in Battlefield 4. Now, obviously, that's a matter of concern as far as we are concerned. Now, Daskro, have you had a lot of experience with battle recorders in previous Battlefield games?
The most experience I've had when it comes to Battlefield Battle Recorder is in Battlefield 2. Battlefield 2 had sort of the definitive battle recorder experience where you could load up a demo of the game, a recording of the game that you just played, and then move that camera around and get every angle you could possibly want to capture all the various moments in the game. And having used that battle recorder quite often in Battlefield 2, I certainly hoped that in Battlefield 3 and in Battlefield 4 we would have seen it come back.
Now, for those of you who are out there wondering why this is regarded as important, we are looking at this for Battlefield 4 from an esports point of view. Now, the reason why this kind of thing would be important is the same reason that demos are requested when you play things like Counter-Strike, when you play things like TF2, things of that nature, because this enables the admins to then take those recordings and review them and actually look to find out if there's anything suspicious. So if for whatever reason somebody complains that another player seems to be doing something suspicious, they can look at the demo and make a judgment based on that. And that's the reason why it will be important as far as Battlefield 4 is concerned, Astro.
Yes, I think there's an additional reason why Battle Recorder is desirable, and it's to allow in the post-production end the ability to really capture and accentuate those Battlefield moments. One of the really cool things about Battlefield as an esport is that it has this combined arms element where you have aircraft and tanks and infantry all fighting each other. And it gets so exciting and so amazing that a lot of us who play competitively or at least cast competitive matches tend to forget how incredible this sort of action is, this sandbox, larger-than-life experience. And a battle recorder allows us to recreate those kinds of moments for all to see. We have these sort of Battlefield moments that get captured online and put on YouTube, people that are running a PVR or running a recording software, and it just through happenstance do they end up recording something that's epic in nature and post it, and then everyone goes wild over it. The potential of having a demo recorder allows us to capture all those moments and record and recreate in the best quality we can those kind of moments and allow people to connect with each other in terms of understanding and appreciating what they're experiencing collectively.
Now, yeah, I understand exactly what you're saying there, because one thing that I found as a caster, you probably found this, is that because there's so much going on in the battlefield, you can't get to every single point. You can't expect to see, and sometimes you miss what would be regarded as a huge play because you can't technically see everything, because you're focusing on one particular aspect of the battle at that particular point in time. Now, obviously, if you have the demo, then like you said, you can fly around, you can capture those moments, you can change them, or well, not so much change them, but make them very cinematic in terms of their presentation, and use it as a way to sort of, toot the horn of Battlefield, so to speak. And so that kind of aspect of it is very helpful in giving. I mean, you just have to look at some of the stunt films that they did from Battlefield 2, some of the stunt stuff that they did there. Obviously, they'll be using Battle Recorder and things of that nature, and
Yes.
it enables them to create these amazing videos of the silliest stunts you could possibly imagine, and they became absolutely huge. I mean, these were so popular, and it made a huge amount of difference to the community and helped kind of grow the community through this kind of shared experience as a result of enjoying the silliness that occurred in that particular those particular films.
Yes. And going back to the esports angle, though, it allows us to better identify instances in which there are questions of impropriety. It also allows us to, from uh, a coach perspective, to be able to review matches and understand really what happened in that deep through a debrief of why a given team won or lost, what positionings were working and not working. Those other elements are very critical, and you can really do that through a very easy to implement demo recorder where you grab that demo and you play it and you can get any angle you want, or you have to manually capture each of the various perspectives of your players, be it through a spectator toolset, which we now have in Battlefield 4 luckily, or having each of the player manually record their perspective. And even then, you're only capturing 50% of perspectives because you're not going to easily be able to get your opponent's perspective. But this is why Battlerecorder it creates so much more flexibility and so much ease of access to this kind of information.
Now, obviously, a lot of questions have been asked as a result of that as to why EA and DICE have decided not to implement this particular tool in Battlefield 4. Now, some of the things that I've heard interviews, Jack Frags did a good interview with Lars recently that's up on his channel. If you guys haven't seen that, check out Jack Frags. And one thing he did say as a result of why this particular battle recorder has not been implemented is that they kind of had a plan. They sort of had a roadmap as to what they wanted to achieve, and they were afraid if they were going to try and put too much into the game, that as a result it would kind of dilute the effectiveness of what they've already decided to do, and sort of take away from them the entire Battlefield experience, which they obviously regard as very important. What's your thoughts on that?
I think that is a very non-technical answer to, at its core, in my opinion, a very technical question. And here's why. Now, in going back to Battlefield 2 with the battle record that was in place, my team 20ID made a frag movie, a montage collection of highlights from every match that we had played over the course of 3 or 4 seasons of Battlefield. So every match that we had played, we'd save the demo, put it on a file server that we could all share, and then at the end of that 18-month period, whatever it may be, we began to do the editing process. And we found in horror that every time that we wanted to load up a demo, we had to backtrack on which patch that given game was played on in order for us to be able to run that demo. We had to uninstall the game and then patch Battlefield 2, which you could incrementally patch through individual patch executables, to that given patch. Then we would load the demo, do the recordings that we want to do, and then we'd patch up to the next version of the game and do it again for that next batch of matches. And that's because demo recorders are not videos. They are simply collections of information, metadata of all the players and their locations and the actions that they're taking that create all the action. But when you start changing the variables of the game, be it weapons damage or be it how much health that a given vehicle or asset or even a flag burn takes, when the demo tries to replay itself, it actually crashes. And this is a common issue that we see not just within Battlefield 2, but we saw it within StarCraft. We saw it within the most recent Company of Heroes 2 game, which has a demo recorder, but the moment it patches, all your previous demos no longer
Mm-hmm.
work. And one of the things that we have to remember in Battlefield 2 was that back in Battlefield 2, they were only patching the game every 6 months, maybe. And a lot of people said, well, okay, we'd like to see it patch better for issues of balancing and things like that. Bad Company 2 was patched every 9 months approximately. So it actually got worse in that respect. But when Battlefield 3 came out, due in part to the DLC unveilings and other things around those lines, we saw major updates to the game nearly every 3 months. And what they're saying in Battlefield 4 is that they're going to be patching the game in a much faster rate,
Mm-hmm.
anywhere between 1 to 2 months. And that technical issue of of being able to reconcile the patches for the given demo, I think, is incredibly difficult from a technical perspective to get around. And I'm not saying it's impossible, but I suspect that the amount of resources that would have been required for them to create this environment that allows everyone to be able to play would have been very difficult. And then I also think that more generally, their policy with no land support, which is just to say, in another way, not allowing individual players to have access to the server side executables,
Hmm.
also means that they likely will never be able to do a a any kind of demo playback capability for individual players because at its core, a replanted demo is creating a local server and then having that server read that metadata in that demo file and then recreating all the things that are happening. No different than you were if you were in a multiplayer game and the server was telling you that your enemies that you were playing against were going to a certain point and you see them on your mini map because that's what the server's telling you. It's the same concept. I suspect that the licensing issues that they have put in place and their emphasis on cloud because they don't want to give out those executables exacerbates this issue
Hmm.
of being able to give us a battle recorder.
Now, one thing I did notice that, well, I suppose you could be said that I read into the discussion, or at least I noticed from the discussion that Jack Frags had with Lars, is he said he didn't want to put Battle Recorder into the game as it was being released. But that doesn't necessarily rule out the possibility of it becoming a function later on with either a DLC or later on in the development process, depending on how Battlefield 4 sells. Now, obviously, there are a lot of people out there who will obviously will have the doomsayer type attitude. Well, there's no battle recorder, so Battlefield's 4 potential and as an esport is essentially dead, which is not technically true because they've actually addressed that in many ways with the observer mode, which is now coming back into Battlefield 4. And from what we've seen from the live stream, it's a full functioning observer mode that's going to make things a lot better from the point of view of casting and other aspects like that. But do you think that not having the battle recorder is actually going to affect the longevity of Battlefield 4 as an esport?
I think that it wouldn't hurt if we had it. I would prefer, but I think when we look at popular console esports games that don't have demo recorders in play and their successes, I don't think that it's a one of those requirements that we have to have regardless, or else we're not going to be successful. But I do want to go back to one of the points that you talked about, that in the future a battle recorder could be within the cards. And this is some information that I don't talk about that much, and many people don't talk about that much because it's sort of going into the hacking the game sort of realm. But in Battlefield 3, levelbf.com worked with some other modders and created their own version of spectator tools on their own. It was basically just free cam, and you watch my videos. I use it a lot.
Yeah.
But we weren't just we didn't just create free cam. The other thing that we created in this was we created a web-based 2D minimap that was literally pulling metadata from the clients as the data came in, and then transposing all that information into actual little figures like notating what commander mode looks like.
Yeah.
So we were doing it on a website, real time, using an HTML5. And it worked out just fine. But that wasn't only the data that we were able to find. There were a bunch of things that we found within the code that were not necessarily functional, but they were present, that indicated that they actually got pretty far into a spectator mode within Battlefield 3, and they also got pretty far into a battle recorder within Battlefield 3. There were dozens of commands in place that described how many spectators were watching the game, what the locations of the spectators were. There were different demo recording commands that were also in play. Now, none of these were functional because they were embedded within the code that was never cleaned up, and that led a lot of us to speculate of, well, how far did they really get into this before they were told to stop because of budget issues or because of resource issues,
Hmm.
and then further, is this battle recorder code still in Battlefield 4. This is pure speculation, guys.
Yeah, of course.
There's no evidence to back this up for Battlefield 4, but it's almost like they were trying, but then something went awry, and perhaps we'll never know for years to come what was the reason for it. I personally suspect that in Battlefield 3, it had a lot more to do with the fact that current generation consoles probably couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
That's my guess, and that's always a constraint, guys, when you talk about a multi-platform game. But it does beg the question of really how far they got into it, and if it's in the cards in the future. I most certainly hope it is, and I think it would only help Battlefield esports in the future, but we're just going to have to see.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that it would definitely help with, because if leagues are going to be watching certain things, then you're going to have an observer on there just as an admin who will be trying to
Yeah.
watch everything, which obviously would be circumvented by having the battle recorder because you just have the recording. So, if anything,
Yes.
there's going to be more work required by league and competition admins in order to ensure that there is no cheating. And obviously, with the change that they did in Battlefield 3 to move over to client-side hit detection and things of that nature, it means that it could make things a little bit, not so much, it could increase some of the leagues and competitions overheads when it comes to having to employ more admins to ensure that people don't buck the system, so to speak.
I agree with that. The client-side hit detection in Battlefield 3 has always been a contentious issue, especially when you have large ping disparities. In North America, we have a running joke about South American teams, which is when they're playing against better North American players, they'll always switch to 870 slugs because they know that with the ping disparity, 870 slugs can be one-hit kills, and due to how the client-side hit detection operates, it gives them an advantage. Now, I'm not hating on the South American teams by saying that. That's just one of the things that is kind of a funny aspect about North America and South American Battlefield esports. But it's client-side detection is a big deal, and I'd love to see server-side hit detection, to be honest.
Hmm.
In fact, I'd love to see that before Battlerecorder, uh, not to derail this
Yeah, yeah,
conversation.
yeah, of course, yeah.
But I think that Battlerecorder provides a very good role in this, and I think it's hard for me to expect the leagues and other ladders, unless you're talking about the most well-staffed ones out there,
Hmm.
to have literally a referee uh, on in the map playing in a match at any given time, and even then, that referee is not going to catch everything
Exactly.
because if there's even if it's a 5v5, which is probably the smallest game mode we'll end up seeing in Battlefield, and I think that personally, a larger game mode and team size that accommodates vehicles is a better idea. But regardless of what format and team size you're doing, watching even 10 guys total is difficult. And I say this as someone who does a lot of multi-POV commentaries where I'm looking at, no kidding, 9 or 10 different perspectives simultaneously.
Yeah.
It's hard. It really is. And you don't know exactly what, unless you have a very good eye for it, it's very difficult. So I have reservations about the efficacy of spectator tools in terms of anti-cheat, unless you have 4 referees on who can
Yeah.
watch 2 or 3 people apiece. But that manpower intensity is reserved only for the biggest leagues out there that can push that manpower on them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the likes of the ESL in Europe and MLG and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
These are the leagues that have the financial backing to allow them to do that. But I mean, I I have to say I am very much looking forward to Battlefield 4. I think it's going to be a improvement. There are some aspects of it that I'd like to see some of the options for servers to be able to switch certain aspects off for the
Yes.
professional players so that they don't have to. So if need be, they can switch off Levolution because they don't need it, or they can switch off the weather effect because it'll just get in the way, things of that nature. But I have to say that I think it's going to be an improvement on the previous version, to the point where it will just definitely, I think, start to take off as far as an esports concerned. It's got the potential to do it, I think.
Yes, as I think as long as people find it to be a fun, entertaining, engaging, replayable game, both in the casual play but also in the competitive play, we will have at least the bare minimum set of tools needed to facilitate a successful uh, growth strategy for Battlefield esports with the spectator tools and the server configurations and so on and so forth. But Battlerecorder would be a tremendous addition to this
A cherry
because
on the cake.
I firmly believe that if if a casual player, be it Battlefield or otherwise, were to experience the kind of action that we see in competitive Battlefield, especially when there's vehicles involved, and you could get them a Battlerecorder and just have them be a ghost or a fly on the wall, so to speak, they'll find it to be quite incredible. It's quite a contrast compared to other competitive FPS titles because unlike many which are round-based endeavors, Battlefield is constant. It keeps on going, and
Hmm.
there's just a variety of action always there, almost too much compared to a game that like Call of Duty or Counter-Strike in which you have a round and then everyone dies and then you start over. It's very different for Battlefield, and that's in that respect, I believe that people will enjoy it if they have the opportunity to even watch it. And I think that's what's so core here is that Battlerecorder is another way to experience it, and Spectator Tools does it as well. But I'm all about giving people as many options as they can to experience the battle.
Absolutely. I completely agree. Thank you very much for taking the time to have this discussion with us, Daskra. I really appreciate you coming here and joining us. Is there any things, any shout outs, anything you'd like to say before we come
Sure.
to a close?
Yes, so Chad, I want to thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to many of these top Battlefield European teams like Epsilon to compete within Battlefield 4. Very excited about that. I know I'll be covering this, and I hope that you do too as well, Chad. And
Yeah,
I especially doing some commentaries together. I'd very much like that.
definitely, without a doubt. I'm looking forward to that. I do enjoy it. It kind of broke my heart a little bit not being able to shoutcast Battlefield 3 because of the sheer intensity. I still enjoy playing it even now, even
Yes,
this many
but it's so
years
hard.
later.
I mean, and take in mind, before I had free cam, the only way that I was able to do shoutcast was I literally had to ask the players just to give me their raw footage, and then I had to edit it and things like that, just so I get it to a state in which I could begin to do commentary over it. So, I it's been it's been so overwhelming in terms of the barriers to entry for Battlefield 3, do anything even as easy, relatively easy as shoutcasting, which a lot of us take for granted when we think of Counter Strike or Call of Duty. But in this, it's been very difficult. So I'm looking forward to Battlefield 4 for these reasons and then some.
Indeed. Now, if people want to check out your channel and subscribe to your YouTube content, where can they find you?
Yes, you can find me on youtube.com/Daskro. It's Daskro. In fact, you can find me on all the various social media sites. I'm on Twitter at Daskro. I'm on Facebook at Daskro. I'm on Twitch.tv, Daskro. You can find me all there, and I look forward to all you checking out my content. I think you'll enjoy it if you like esports.
Definitely. Definitely. Thank you very much, Daskro. Appreciate you taking the time. And thanks for listening, everyone. And we'll see you again soon. Take care.
Of understanding and appreciating what they're experiencing collectively.
Now, yeah, I understand exactly what you're saying there because one thing I found as a caster, you probably found this, is that because there's so much going on in the battlefield, you can't get to every single point. You can't expect to see, and sometimes you miss what would be regarded as a huge play because you can't technically see everything, because you're focusing on one particular aspect of the battle at that particular point in time. Now, obviously, if you have the demo, then like you said, you can fly around, you can capture those moments, you can change them, or well, not so much change them, but make them very cinematic in terms of their
Yes.
presentation, and use it as a way to sort of, toot the horn of Battlefield, so to speak. And so that kind of aspect of it is very helpful in giving. I mean, you just have to look at some of the stunt films that they did for.
Has this combined arms element where you have aircraft and tanks and infantry all fighting each other. And it gets so exciting and so amazing that a lot of us who play competitively or at least cast competitive matches tend to forget how incredible this sort of action is, this sandbox, larger than life experience. And a battle recorder allows us to recreate those kinds of moments for all to see. We have these sort of battlefield moments that get captured online and put on YouTube. People that are running a PVR or running a recording software, and it just through happenstance do they end up recording something that's epic in nature and post it, and then everyone goes wild over it. The potential of having a demo recorder allows us to capture all those moments and record and recreate in the best quality we can those kind of moments and allow people to connect with each other in terms
for Battlefield 4 from an esports point of view. Now, the reason why this kind of thing would be important is the same reason that demos are requested when you play things like Counter-Strike, when you play things like TF2, things of that nature, because this enables the admins to then take those recordings and review them and actually look to find out if there's anything suspicious. So if for whatever reason somebody complains that another player seems to be doing something suspicious, they can look at the demo and make a judgment based on that. And that's the reason why it will be important as far as Battlefield 4 is concerned, Astro.
Yes, I think there's an additional reason why Battlerecorder is desirable, and it's to allow in the post-production end the ability to really capture and accentuate those Battlefield moments. One of the really cool things about Battlefield as an esport is that it
obviously that's a matter of concern as far as we are concerned. Now, have you, Dasgro, have you had a lot of experience with battle recorders in previous Battlefield games?
the most experience I've had when it comes to Battlefield Battle Recorder is in Battlefield 2. Battlefield 2 had sort of the definitive battle recorder experience where you could load up a demo of the game, a recording of the game that you just played, and then move that camera around and get every angle you could possibly want to capture all the various moments in the game. And having used that battle recorder quite often in Battlefield 2, I certainly hoped that in Battlefield 3 and in Battlefield 4 we would have seen it come back.
Now, for those of you who are out there wondering why this is regarded as important, we are looking at this. Hello, boys and girls. This is Chadman from the ChadTopia, and we have a rather special thing for you today. I have a discussion with a Battlefield caster from America, otherwise known as Dasgro. Good evening, Dasgro.
Good evening. Glad to be here.
Yeah, now, the reason I dragged poor old Dasgro in here, kicking and screaming, is obviously because of his interest in Battlefield and esports in general. Wanted to have a discussion with him about the Battle Recorder. Now, for those of you who are not aware of what that is, this was a recording system that enabled you to essentially record demos and then go back and do films and all that kind of stuff. Now, for those of you who have not seen any of the Gamescom coverage, you will know that essentially Battle Recorder is not being included in Battlefield 4. Now,